Doctor, are you living the dream or just dreaming of living? It is my honor to announce the PDA 20th Anniversary Special Conference this September 12th to the 14th in Frisco, Texas, the nation's leading course on dental practice growth. If you feel isolated as a leader who is frustrated that your schedule is unproductive, maybe your team is disjointed, or your systems are inefficient, this is the conference for you. The PDA 20th Anniversary Conference has all new features, including keynote speaker Emmitt Smith, who is a Pro Football Hall of Fame running back and entrepreneur. You can choose your own educational track to customize your learning experience. And when you register before July 1st, you will receive a 90-minute pre-meeting session that can help you boost and increase your productivity before you even attend the conference. Go to www.productivedentist.com and click the pop-up, or select Productive Dentist Academy Conference under the Dental CE and Events tab. That's www.productivedentist.com. Seating is limited. Register today, and we look forward to helping you make your dreams become reality.
Hey, you know how you're running yourself ragged? Yeah, and it's just like, yes, I know that's the problem. It's like, well, stop it.
Welcome to the Everyday Practices Podcast. I'm Regan Robertson, and my co-host, Dr. Chad Johnson, and I are on a mission to share the stories of everyday dentists who generate extraordinary results using practical, proven methods you can take right into your own dental practice. If you're ready to elevate patient care and produce results that are anything but ordinary, buckle up and listen in.
Welcome to another episode of Everyday Practices Dental Podcast. I am your host, Regan Robertson, here with the doctor who's not dentisting today, Dr. Chad Johnson. Welcome to the show.
Welcome, Regan. Glad to see you. Is it sunny in your area, or is it the usual?
It was beautiful and sunny this afternoon. I believe it is going to rain all weekend long. No hiking for me. I wanted to go hike Lake 22. I was very excited about it, and it's raining.
Yeah. Well, we did a book together, separately but together, Margin by Dr. Richard Swenson, MD, who did missionary work in Africa. And he then noticed the stark contrast between a society and a culture and a tribe, a group of people who have margin, or let's just say time to spare, and people who don't have margin, which would be the American way, by and large.
Yes.
So we wanted to just talk about that book. Why don't you give me your opening thoughts? Because you had mentioned, let's get controversial. You had said, what I didn't like was, give me that.
So in that summation that you just gave, Chad, I think it is pretty easy to tell in a nutshell. Do you live a life with margin or a life that is marginless? And a life that marginless looks like rushing to get out the door so that you can go to work. You get stuck behind a car that's going 10 miles under the speed limit. Then you realize you're out of gas. You have to go get gas before you make it to the office. You're late for your meeting, and on and on and on.
Yep.
So if you're living a marginless life, it means you are just pushing it up to the very, very top of the line, and you are not giving yourself any break. So that is how you can know, are you living a life with margin and space or not? So I felt that Dr. Swenson spent a large amount of time talking or giving examples of what a marginless life looks like. And I felt like, yes, I get it. Let's move on to the solution. So sometimes I get a little impatient and I want to get to solution, but I thoroughly enjoyed this book.
You have a good point in that, it seems like there's a while where he's giving the diagnosis. He kind of talks about the diagnosis, the prognosis, and the prescription.
Yeah.
And what's interesting is that when he's going ad nauseum, let's just say, about the lack of margin and what that looks like, I do think when the goal of that perhaps is to cut to the core of the listener or the reader to be able to go, that's me. And when you do hear, it's just like, hey, you know how you wake up in the morning and then you throw down a quick donut real quick or a quick protein shake while you're on the drive to work and you have to go 10 miles per hour over, or else you're going to, and you only woke up 15 minutes before you're supposed to be at work, and that's also just another way where we're just trying to push and push. But that is the solution. So like inherently you go, don't do that. It reminds me that comedy act with that guy from the 80s. I can't believe I'm blanking on his name. And I've seen it on YouTube where he's dialoguing with a woman and she says, so, here's my problems. And he says, well, I know the solution to that. And the solution he then says is stop it. And she says, what do you mean? And he says, stop it. And it's supposed to be,
I know that. I remember that.
Yeah,
yes.
it's
Bob
just
Newhart,
supposed to be funny. Bob Newhart, thank you. Yes, and it's supposed to be funny, but it actually is the solution. Where it's just like, hey, you know how you're running yourself ragged? Yeah, and it's just like, yes, I know that's the problem. It's like, well, stop it.
Oh, I have a story for that. It popped up in my head multiple times with the book Margin, and I had to chuckle because it is I don't get it until I get it scenario. So my husband and I been together over 20 years. We have had a long-standing argument when we travel and vacation, if we're taking a plane. I run my life with little margin. Yep. So whenever I travel, when I'm sliding into that airport, it's their boarding. Like I am walking up as they're boarding. And in my mind, why? I don't want to hang out and wait at the airport. I know how much time I have. Yes, a few things may happen, but I'm going to buffer for that and it's going to be fine. But I am always rushed. I'm always go, go, go. And I don't know what made me change my mind or why this particular time. I think I decided I didn't want the argument. So I said, I'm just going to go as early as you want me to go to the airport. And I'm going to go on your schedule instead of my own push it to the limit schedule. We got in, we had plenty of time. Nothing was rushed. It was really easy. And I felt my physical stress level be much lower. And I sat there kind of waiting for the plane and I went, oh, this is what it feels like. I don't have to be constantly going. Yes. Since that time, I have now adopted the policy of being significantly early to the airport, and it makes me feel more in control. It makes me feel calmer. And, Dr. Swenson talks about the reason why I think him setting up the theory and the examples of where you're living in a marginless life is in these buckets that he made. So there's like your emotional reserve, or like your emotional bank, your physical bank, your mental bank, and your spiritual bank. I think it was the buckets that he had. And he's able to kind of explain that when you're running low or you're running tight in each of those buckets, that's what compiles and makes your life so stressed out all the time.
Yeah. I like one of his quotes that I wrote out was, no one has time to listen, let alone love. And that was really good. And so in other words, like the minimal might be, that you can listen to someone. Hey, I need help. Yeah, well, I heard you. That's neat and all, but I've got to move on. Right. Mm-hmm. Versus, someone that actually can stop and say, tell me more. What does that mean? Like to pause and so there's definitely a human element to this book. The things that are, for the podcast listener now to know, he definitely hits this from a Christian perspective. He doesn't deny or hide that he is taking this from a Christian perspective. And yet I think there's something inviting to this that it would invite other religions or worldviews to also appreciate this book. So if you get what I'm saying, like he doesn't shy away from, hey, I'm a Christian and that's how I'm writing this book, but you can still be a human, and in your humanity, you can appreciate the fact that having margin will help you be a more loving person, a better community, a better father, a better mother, stuff like that. So I don't think someone would have to be Christian per se, unless they were, there are the types that are, that might be anti-God, that would be like, I don't want to hear this about, trying to make sure that I've got enough time, so I can, connect with God. If you can overlook that kind of stuff when he's talking about that, I think this book is for anyone. So I just thought, fair game. Let's point that out there.
Yeah, it's true. It is a Christian book. My favorite quote, I like that you said it was, Jesus napped. Jesus took naps.
Yes.
I did chuckle at that. I believe everybody can get something out of this book, spiritual or not, because that's only a portion of it. anyway. So
Yes.
the formula to pay attention to, the formula that I pay attention to is power minus load equals margin.
Mm-hmm.
And that particular, so power could be your time and load could be your commitments.
Mm-hmm.
So how much time do you have and how many commitments do you have? Do you have enough? And then the secret to me in my mind was adjusting and giving space to context. So contextual shifting is very real. I know in my meetings every single day, I run them back to back to back, and I allow myself very little space to contextually shift so that I can be super present. I know there's been days when I drive home and I almost want to hide in the garage because I know I am exhausted, Chad.
Yeah.
And I have helped make decisions and I have helped facilitate calls and I have done all these things. And then I get home and I know as soon as I walk in that door, I'm on again and I can't give my best. And so then, my children get a depleted version of me.
Yes.
And that's rough. So looking at power minus load equals where you put your margin. It's a little bit frustrating. I don't know about you. For me, it is because I want to do all the things.
Of course.
Do it all.
Well, and he talks about that in this book. Yeah, he talks about that in this book. If we have room, then it's just like, well, why not fill it with more experiences? Why not fill it with more fun, with more, so that way we can complete more. And so this book is just very healthy. I thought actually this would be a very good and challenging book for you, Regan, because your life is full, and that this book would be kind of one of those heavy books, like heavy in the sense that you can listen to it, but then it's just like, okay, now how do I do this?
Mm-hmm. I think I've been slowly putting into play certain he has 75 prescriptions that he offers as his solutions. So some of the things, I think it's hard. I think it's always going to be a challenge for me. But when I can slow down and be intentional and think about it, I find that I'm able to win. So like in your emotional reserve, for example, like being intentional about building good friendships and honoring that. So let's unpack just that one piece of your besties, meaning like someone you talk to often. Yes. How many friends would you say you have?
Of close ones.
Yes.
I don't know. Let's say 3.
Right. 3 is about what people supposedly should have. Don't quote me on that, but I've heard that like three close friends.
It would be hard to say I have 150, right? It's just like I have 150 best friends. It's just like, listen,
it wouldn't be, I don't think that would be realistic. You could say that.
You could say it. I just don't know if I believe,
I've got 5 close friendships outside of my immediate family. So I've got close, and I have had to, with some people in my life, almost say no, not almost, I have said no. And that is the weirdest, most egotistical in my head, thing to say, but somebody will say they want to do friendship things with me. I don't have capacity. And so what I end up saying is, I think you're an amazing human being and I genuinely do. And I would love to hang out, and I'm not going to be able to give you what I think you deserve in a friend, because I put, I rank in order the things that I'm able to give time to. And my close friends they know, and they'll text me, they'll say, what's going on if you're not being, super responsive or you're taking a little space from things. So I try to be intentional. That's one thing, with the friendships. And then also the physical reserve part was a really, really fascinating section to go through, because he talks about being kind to your heart physically. Mm-hmm. So making sure that you get your exercise in.
Yes.
And even if you're older, so he's got prescriptions if you're older, that you can, if you have lower back pains, even walking can help. But if you're arthritic, that might not help. Bodybuilding, but not for the vanity of it. So here's what's helpful for you. You can lower your heart rate. And then he gets a little engineering. So if you lower your heart rate from 80 beats to 60 beats, this is 10 million beats. This is what this saves over time. So he kind of chatified it a little bit, which was very intriguing to me as well. Yeah. And I skipped over a lot of the gratitudes. I feel like I am full up on, I do gratitudes every single day. And I think that has rewired my brain, fully, truly rewired my brain. So I forced myself to do 3 gratitudes every single day for years. And now it has just sort of been built in. So the the suggestions that I think Dr. Swenson has, they're a bunch, it's like 1,000 mini things
Yes.
that create margin.
Yes. And if you missed one, let's say you skipped a page and you only did, 60 of these 75, the other 15 that you skipped over on a page are probably going to fall into place because you're doing the other ones, so if you're allowing yourself margin, you're going to allow yourself margin in other areas. And I think this might be a good time to talk about the why or the purpose, is so that way you are your best for others. So he's like, if you want to love others, then you need to be your best. And if you're your best, you have to allow for margin. When I owned 3 practices, that was probably about the busiest time in my life. And because I'd get done working the morning at one and I'd drive over to the other one. And then if necessary, go drive to the third one to check on that. They're all 20 minutes apart. So it's not like it's that ridiculous. But I do remember just thinking, man, if I had a helicopter and I could fly to this place quicker, and if I could just slingshot myself over to this place, because like the drive time, I'm getting behind someone and I don't want to be the jerk that's like riding someone's tail, but I'm like, but if you would move out of my way, I could, like speed all the faster so I could get there, and it's just like, man, I'm trying to, in essence, be at 2 places at once, but we're not designed for that. So and so this was a really cool quote that you've seen in my notes that I wrote out, but it says, what if we were to begin measuring our progress, not by our wealth, but by our virtue, not by our education, but by our humility, and not by our power, but by our meekness? How many times do you hear a book talking about our meekness? And meekness is an interesting word. In English, a lot of times we correlate weakness and meekness together because they rhyme, but meekness is power under control. So a horse that is bridled is meeked. That like it actually is an old English word, like that a horse would be meeked.
Yes.
And so when a horse was meeked, they didn't lose power. They were now powerful under control.
I wrote in my notes some of my quick takeaways, and one of them was resisting the urge for convenience. And in the physical section, I think it was chapter 8 or chapter 9, Dr. Swenson talks about parking a block away from your destination in order to help you move your body, because most of us live fairly sedentary lives. And I loved how counterintuitive that was to me. So you can imagine me twitching at the thought of that. Okay, like park a block or 2 blocks away so that I have to spend more time getting to the destination. And that points to your story of, can I just, helicopter and go faster and do more? So that counterintuitive disruption in my mind made me think about, well, that to me, like you said, is it's power under control. You're making a choice, and that choice is building up the reserve in your physical bucket.
Yep. That reminded me of something that I've done ever since I've started my practice. So this is literally everyday practices as far as every business day. I park the furthest away from the office door, to, as a gentleman, to serve others. And so what's interesting is when I do that, my intention is to put them first, which is a great way to start the day, right? So, and listen, therefore, I don't turn out to be saintly in all my day and all my ways. Okay. So I don't want to, make it sound like, therefore, that sets the tone for me to be perfect and awesome every day. But it's a great way to start. And I've done that now for, in 1 month, that'll be 19 years that I've done that, is, parked to the furthest away, and it's to serve the others. And it's a dumb little way. I mean, so I've got an extra.
It's not dumb at all. But you're modeling the way for others. So in your leadership, you're modeling the way.
Yes. Well, and it could be bigger, but like it's a small way. And again, this book is just a bunch of little small ways. So everyday practices for the listener. Instead of choosing, to put your sign in the closest one to the door, what if you, actually just parked the furthest away from the office. And so you have to walk an extra 15 seconds, 10 seconds, it's not the end of the world. And, like on rainy days and snowy days, it's a smidge worse, right? Than the sunny days where what's it matter, right? I even wonder sometimes if when people say that they like the long drive to work, because it allows them time to think and decompress and stuff like that, that's actually establishing margin. They're taking a mundane task of driving to and from work, or to and from their home, and making it intentional of, no, I'm using that time to decompress and to think and to strategize and stuff like that. So that's a powerful way that you can time bend as well.
Dolly Parton does great time bending. She has no cell phone, and you have to fax her things still to this day. And I just read a little quip about why she doesn't have a cell phone and she said, I don't text because I do not want the responsibility of having to reply.
Yeah.
So she controls her narrative and her space around her by choosing not to let technology take control of her. And I think that's one of he speaks about technology in the book and how, if all of this, like, in the 1920s, apparently it was a thing in the United States where because of technology, society thought, well, gosh, everyone will have 2-day work weeks.
Yes.
And now the reality is over in Europe, they have 14 weeks less of work per year than the United States. We have all this technology, but yet so few time. However, when I think about in the 90s, I wasn't doom scrolling. I wasn't going through all my social media. I wasn't playing phone app games. We had a few TV shows to watch. We didn't have endless amount with multiple streaming services going at all times. So there's a lot that can steal our time if we choose to let it steal our time.
So if progress were actually the solution in our lives, then we would find that our lives would be better. But he noticed when he was doing mission work in his small tribal community, one of the town elders said, you Americans have all the watches, but we have all the time. And that was a cool saying. That was kind of a cool. And one of his quotes then was, he said, progress is a saboteur of margin. So we always want progress and this and that. And he's not anti that kind of stuff, but he also talks about giving. And I think it's really cool. He's just like, so what if someone takes your chainsaw and doesn't return it? Like, is that really the end of the world? Like, just let them borrow your chainsaw. Then you're a blessing to someone. But if your goal is to be like, well, what if he doesn't sharpen the blade as good as I do? It's like, so he probably won't. Get over it and just let him borrow it. Like, he's like, I think that was his example. He's like, I haven't seen my chainsaw in 3 years and I don't think I've missed it. Like, it's not a big deal. So it was just really cool when he talked about, like, maybe we should reconsider how it's going for us, the way that we're doing it as Americans by and large. It's just like, maybe it's not exactly progress.
Well, I think that example gives grace to people's humanness.
Yeah.
Too. In that, in the emotional bucket, one of the things that resonated with me was to mend any broken or unresolved relationships.
Yeah.
So this is where I'm going to contradict myself, because it took me space to like the theory. So it took the explanation of where we're sucking up our margin. So this one I definitely learned. If you have an unresolved relationship or an unreconciled relationship, something's broken or whatever, that takes up margin in your heart and your space and your mind. And so if you don't reconcile that, that can give you less margin. And I really like that was a mind bender for me.
Yes.
I think of rushing around and doing, and that helped me think of margin in a completely different way. It was a great prescription.
And even in the New Testament in the Bible, it says, if you're about ready to take communion, if you're going to take communion, but you have harbored a problem or, like a quarrel with a brother, drop your communion right now and go and make it right with your brother first. Then have communion with God, because you're wanting to have this union with God, the communion, And yet if you're not right with your brother, then it's not communion. So it's even, there's so much, that spiritually aligns with this kind of stuff. Tell you, overall, I really liked this book. Hopefully we didn't spoil alert, much, other than a few quotes and stuff like that. But qualitatively, I really loved the reader of this in Audible. Like, so the audio recorder guy, I don't know what they call him, the voice
The narrator.
That's the word I wanted. Yeah, thank you. The narrator was fantastic, and I just really loved the heart of this book. So I hope the listeners to this podcast, or whether they're reading it or listening to it, really enjoy this book. It was kind of a fun find for me. Your concluding thoughts? Yeah.
You surmised it very well. I'm excited to take some of these prescriptions and put them into play and see the results of them. In our book journey so far, I don't know how many books we've read so far, but in all the books that we have conquered together, I find myself using principles from each book that I have found in PDA. So with my team, or even with Victoria, so you can lead up and down the chain, no matter where, with all the books that we've read so far. And I think this book helps me, over the past couple of weeks that I've been reading it. It gives me perspective on what really matters. So in a leadership capacity, being able to prioritize what truly is the best longest serving term solution here. And it gives me that humanness and that grace for our team. So instead of thinking that we're in a constant race for every day, just keep going. Let's just back up a little bit and realize that those days turn into years. I've been with PDA for 13 years now. Yeah. So let's play the long game. And I think the long game is creating small disciplines like the book Margin recommends. It gives you, there are 75 different ways that you can create space in your life. And I'm excited to put some of those into place. Some I had already put in place, I was excited about. And then others I thought, I'll give that a try. It's very challenging, but also remember, changing neurological pathways in your brain takes a heck of a lot of time. Yeah. So give yourself a little grace, pick a few, try it, and see how it goes. I recommend the book for sure.
Well, Regan, I'm going to give a spoil to the listeners. Chris Hogan is an author that's worked with Dave Ramsey historically. Our next book is Everyday Millionaires. So if you want to get listening, Everyday Millionaires by Chris Hogan is our next book. It's a short one and powerful. So we'll see you then.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Everyday Practices Podcast. Chad and I are here every week thanks to our community of listeners just like you, and we'd love your help. It would mean the world if you can help spread the word by sharing this episode with a fellow dentist and leave us a review on iTunes or Spotify. Do you have an extraordinary story you'd like to share, or feedback on how we can make this podcast even more awesome? Drop us an email at podcast@productivedentist.com. And don't forget to check out our other podcasts from Productive Dentist Academy at productivedentist.com/podcasts. See you next week.